My name is Omonde Chuka, and this is Dialogues with Jagero. Today, I am here with the beautiful lady, Rachel Stephanie. How are you?
I'm very fine. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. How's the day for you?
Nice yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Look at the camera. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, one which is very relatable to a lot of people, not just the two of us that are sitting here. Time. But not just time, really. Living on borrowed time. You're born into this world. They say you come here naked. We wear our skins. But then again, you're born naked. You come here and you start life.
Yeah.
Some people say that the whole of life is borrowed. I don't know how true that is, to what extent. But it's very interesting. In chapter 19 of my upcoming memoir, I talk about this very specific line. I'll read it verbatim. When you're born and the veil of absurdity is pricked, you remain not the same. That you live your life feeling insecure, feeling secure. You live your life feeling insulated from things that could happen to you potentially. You live your life having a certain path, a certain life course, and you believe this is what you're supposed to follow after. This is what your life is supposed to be looking like.
Yeah.
And then something happens, or a moment happens, or the Damascus Moment happens.
The Damascus Moment. Okay.
So I want take me back to your Damascus Moment, the thing that changes or breaks the veil of the absurd for you so much that you get to learn that the whole of life, or at least from that moment going forward, life is borrowed. How was it like that for you?
For me, it was wow. You've like literally just taken me back, you know, because
That was the whole point.
yeah. Because I'm just looking at myself right now. I was actually telling a friend of mine, I really miss the 13-year-old to the 25-year-old bold woman that I used to be, you know.
You're a woman. Yeah.
That girl was very was so ready to take on life as it comes, you know. But from the age of 26, I feel like I was introduced to a whole new person. Have you ever been in your body and you're wondering, who is this person, you know? That was the beginning for me when my mom passed on. And I realized things are no longer the same as they ought to seem, you know. When you have dreams of building a home for your mom, and then coming from a family that's separated, hoping that one day you'll get to live with your mom and your brother in one space. But then when she passes on, that's it. Where do you take your dream to? You know, that's when you realize, oh my good Lord, I've been living my life. You know, you don't realize you're living your life for someone up until someone goes, and then you realize I have been living my life for this person. The visions and the dreams I had were for this person. Then you start asking yourself, who are you?
Without this person.
Yeah, what do you want in this lifetime? So 2016, you're there figuring yourself out. Then 2019, and you get sick. And even the normal that you are used to. Oh, you know how people ask these very simple questions. What's your hobby? They're like, I love climbing the mountains. All of a sudden, you cannot even do that. You no longer can climb that mountain. What's your favorite food? I love chapati and dengu or beans. You can no longer have chapati because, there's something called now gluten-free. You're now a gluten-free someone. You're now a bigger person because you're using steroids. You're just reintroduced to a whole other lifetime, you know? And the aspect of now borrowed time is when you realize the doc tells you, you're going to live with this disease for the rest of your life.
It's lifelong.
Yeah. And now I'm asking myself, does that mean I have to be this new person who I am no longer the strong kid who alikuwa nakanyaganga charcoal back in the day in the name of confirming that what a man can do, a woman can do too. Like, I can't do that to myself. My skin is no longer as strong as it used to be, you know. And the idea of the debt bondage, where now you have to think about you're already on debt even before you begin that lifetime. You know, you already have this financial situation that you need to deal with, like dower, 5,000 shillings, very basic stuff, you know. But then, you know, this is something before you even begin life. This is something that's already written that you have to handle. And I remember at some point I gave it all up. I was just like, God, by the way, it's either you take me or I heal, you know. And for me, the aspect of borrowed time is, I used to actually say I'm living on my bonus years, because it no longer felt like I was living. Yeah.
You stopped living, or you were pushed to the precipice where you felt. Yeah. Because for a lot of people, when we're talking off the record, we were actually realizing that for a lot of people, it is not entirely a moment or an event that happens to us. It gets to be a culmination, and it's very hard to separate between a before and an after. But you get to that feeling, it grips you with an iron fist. I think that iron fist, when you for those wale fundi ambao you're a believer, so nimetengenezwa na fundi ambao, when the vice grips you, there is a measure, there is only so much space you can move. You are within this straight jacket. And you've mentioned something very interesting, because in 2012, I had a coma. I think I've shared it a lot of times, but in 2012, I had a coma that lasted 43 days. But not soon after, I was actually bedridden for 14 months. Oh, and wow. that loss of
that's
personal,
1 year, 2 months. That's 365 plus 60. That's a whole 425 days, man.
So that loss of personal agency, where you have to be dependent on a nurse to change you, like you're basically a child again. So that already, it disrupts the way a timeline of a person, of a human being is supposed to be. And it's the same thing which you're saying. When you're leaving, you have these aspirations and dreams. You want to change your mom's life. You want to be able to sustain your brother together. You're living in a happy family.
Yeah.
This is an aspiration. So when that is distorted, I'm here. And I remember the aftermath of that period of being a vegetable. We'll come to that.
A cabbage, friend. A cabbage.
Of being a vegetable.
Yeah.
So you are in this place where the body as you knew it is a stranger. So I remember, being like a valedictorian. A valedictorian is somebody who gives a speech for having excelled on top of a class.
Yes.
So I've come out of a coma. I've graduated from a life that I knew. But the body is no longer mine. I don't feel like it's mine. It's kind of like a suit that I'm putting on.
Yeah.
And then comes the personalities. And I think this is also something that goes to everybody who I think has been closer or within the same proximity of this experience, where you feel so stuck, so disconnected from yourself. And then you realize that actually people usually say, and I think we remember last time when you visited, when we were talking with Jagero, and we were sharing about how people say, live one day at a time. But life has real demands. Life has things that you need to take care of. And so that means that you cannot actually discard it off and say, I'll live a day at a time. No, you have realities that you need to tend to. But this very final thing puts you on check. It puts you on notice. It's kama zile HR, zile letters za HR. Wachana na zile warning letter. Sasa hii umepewa, there was no warning letter. Wamepiga tu box ndo ile.
Yo.
Yeah. So you have to start life anew, but then you do not have the plentiness of time the way it was before. Talk about the cabbage.
You're saying that, and I'm just thinking to myself how the very basics, how you used to dress, You know, you'd always like go to mama wa kuuza nguo and you can tell them size yangu ni waist size yangu ni this much or t-shirt size yangu ni hii. But now imagine being in a new body where you don't even know, like the very basic, you don't even know nguo gani ukivaa utakaa vizuri. Because it's a whole new spectrum. You see other people who have your body size and all that, but that's not what you are used to. You know. And the very basic of, there was a time in my life I loved cooking. I know. I usually say I don't like cooking. But I love to experiment with dishes. But then all of a sudden you're this person who ata hiyo kusonga ugali. You know, people take so many funny things for granted. Isongaing ugali I couldn't, because now mkono yangu is just a cabbage. For the lack of a better word, you know. Carrying a spoon. It should be easy, you know. So many people
taking a bath. Especially that.
My good Lord. Taking a bath and thinking about, you know, it got to a point I was being told I have to wash my clothes with hot water.
So take me back. I'm going to use this very interesting analogy. You have always shared about the cabbage analogy.
Yeah.
What's on your baptism card? I usually call it a baptism card.
Baptism card.
Because that is what gives you a new name.
Yes.
That is what introduces you to a new experience.
Yes.
You've talked about briefly, I think it was more of an introductory part.
Yeah.
You talked about what changed for you. You've shared about your mom passing. But I want to know, and the audience is very interested to know, what is on your baptism card when this change happens?
It is the year 2019. And all of a sudden I can't walk outside the house. Nikitoka nje ya nyumba na jua inawaka, my feet wobble and I become sick instantly. And that happens for a period of 2 weeks.
What goes in your mind during that 2 weeks?
I'm so confused. I'm like, did I just get an allergy over the sun?
All of a sudden.
Where is this coming from? And I was in so much pain as well. But the funniest thing about this situation was every time I went back to my bed and I slept, na nikajifunika vizuri, niko sawa. So for those 2 weeks, I was avoiding the sun, but then I was also staying in bed. So during that period, because I was in so much pain, my family members, of course, I informed them, but then I was living alone. So I tell them about what's going on and how much, for a very long time, I've been known to have joint pains. So my assumption was I just have joint pains. And let me just take you back kidogo. Before that, when I was in campus, I used to fall down consciously. It's like I'm having a conversation with you right now and I'm telling you, Ochuka. I guess because you're having dialogues with Jagero, so I'm here. Yeah. So I could tell you, Ochuka, I'm actually going to fall down right now.
So you can feel the onset.
I can feel the onset literally, and even when I fall, I am very conscious that I've fallen. So I started laughing with my friends about the situation. And right before that, I used to have joint issues. So when it's cold, I'm on joint pains. And right before that, I used to have this tumbo kuuma most of the time. So why I'm taking you back is now because it will make sense as we get into the actual thing that happened. So I experienced this new thing. It's not as scary because over time, my whole life, I've been having these two weird things happening here and there. But then now the pain is it's extremely painful. It's a new kind of pain. And I remember we went from hospital to hospital just trying to understand what exactly is happening to me. So then my personal doctor, who's been treating me since I was in primary school, I get to tell him about this, and I remember him looking at me and telling me, oh my God, you have rheumatoid arthritis. And you know when your doctor is worried.
You can see the language that they're trying to conceal.
He was so sad. And And it's not like he's not seen me over time having issues, but this one saddened him, and for me, it scared me, to be honest.
Beyond it, did it scare you beyond the actual news that you're actually receiving?
Yeah, his reaction was what actually now scared me. Because at that point, I remember even going to Nkenda washroom. I couldn't
sit on the bar.
It was so painful. I cried like no one's business. And I remember him saying, okay, I can't put you on actual medication right now because it's either you have rheumatoid arthritis or maybe it's lupus or it could be something. We've checked the blood sample. It's not very clear what it is, but we will treat it as rheumatoid arthritis for a start.
So there was also the case of the uncertainty that's around.
Yeah, but I'm so thankful that he told me.
Had he not?
I would have felt betrayed way later, which I will also explain, you know. And I remember him telling me, I will not put you on RA drugs because they can get cancerous at some. That's when I knew there's a problem. The minute he mentioned the cancerous drugs, I was like, oh, okay. So it's like, we're just going to like put you on pain stabilizers as we go. But of course, one of the drugs was also cancerous. So I started doing research on my own because now I couldn't, you know, for a long time, I'm a co-founder of an art-based initiative called Anika Initiative. So interestingly enough, interestingly enough, for like a whole year, we were talking about mental health issues. But my friend, when it now visits home, now you understand it differently. Now you actually get what's going on, you know. Then I say having depressive moments. I say reading the effects of the medication. First, in 2 weeks, I had added 14 kgs.
It's ballooning.
You know? And me, I panicked, man. Umezoea, you're 56. Now you're talking about a whole 60-something. And then in less than 2 weeks, you're into 70-something. My God. I remember getting really confused, you know, because now I'm in and out of hospital. So the time it got really worse, barely in that 1 month, I remember I was in Hosi like today. And then I spent my old savings in the hospital. My family members also spent a huge chunk of money. And still, it was not clear what was really going on. But then at that time, I'm being put through physio. And so every time I go in physio, it's very easy. I feel better. I feel, you know. But then the sustainability of it, to be told that you're going to live with this for the rest of your life, was very confusing.
So was that the defining moment where you now get to call it borrowed time, or did that come up later?
Where now,
do you have a defining moment?
It came later.
Can you talk about
when
that?
I was feeling like I'm living on borrowed time, that came a bit later. Why? Let me expound. So when I found out I have rheumatoid arthritis, I started doing research because I was puking most of the time. I was in pain most of the time. So I'm just asking myself, and these pains are different. Yeah. Sometimes it's the heel pain. Yeah. Sometimes you feel like you have stones on your shoulder. Sometimes you just feel like... So the most interesting one that I laugh about, that I shouldn't be laughing about, is... ukipasa nguo alafu uchomwe. That a pain you have. So now I was having that over and over again. I hear it's called a burning sensation. So I would have those, most of the time, flashes. Then I figured, I probably need to get into a group maybe and understand what rheumatoid arthritis truly is. So then I get into Facebook, because physically, hakukuwa na hizo groups available. So I joined a Facebook group. I think that was that was a plus, and that was a negative as well. Because now you're meeting different people who are facing rheumatoid arthritis, and they're on different stages of their lives. Some are already on wheelchairs. So shock for me was...
There's triumph and there's defeat at the same time.
You know.
This pool of people.
Yes. So I see everyone says you'll end up in the wheelchair. I remember and at that time I'm having knee problems. So for me, that was the time I was just asking myself, I have a new body. Very soon I'll be in a wheelchair. The one that shook me more was when usaa ilikuwa inatoka kwa mguu ya mtu, and to be told that this is something you have to, you'll at some point in your life you'll have to experience, and then having the loss of hair. Because I also noticed when I started doing this, I was just like, kidogo nazi. You know, I used to laugh about it. Took me time, but then I started laughing about this situation. So every time I have something new, I just laugh because there's already too much sadness. There's already too much depressive moments. There's just hopelessness basically surrounding this whole situation. So I started just laughing about the whole situation.
Let me take you back a little bit.
Yeah.
For most people who get to reach this point, a lot of people do not have the heightened awareness. In fact, this is also because the idea of treatment or the idea of seeking professional help is not very many people are not well conversant with it.
Yeah.
So most people tend to leave that decision onto the caregiver or the health provider. And in fact, even when they receive such a news, there's never any drive to do a search, which you call the research. I also remember reading a lot of journals about my diagnosis. I was very informed about it. And in fact, I usually contemplate thinking that, that is one of the things that has made my journey a little bit bearable, because I understand how because it gets to a point where you have to parent yourself, you have to be your own doctor.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I want to get your perspective in terms of the general population, which is a huge number of people. When they are in this place where you're feeling certainly something is off, I do not have time as much as I thought I did. Many people live through distorted dreams. Many people live through a life that they never thought they would ever experience in their wild imagination. But now it has happened, and somehow they have not figured out that they are in a crunch of time. How do people deal with that? And which would be better for you, if you were to be more proactive or you leave it to fate?
I experienced both. I think right now I can just talk about it because I have found strength. In hindsight. But when it started, at some point I was just super hopeless. As a matter of fact, I was having conversations with God and asking him, for how long? I really just want to go to heaven, and I don't want to feel pain anymore. I don't want to feel like I'm a debt anymore. I don't want to feel lost in my own body anymore. I do not understand this lifetime. So there were instances where I felt hopeless. And I won't lie to you saying that you should probably figure out what you want to do with this information. Because when you live it, how you live it is what judges where you're heading. The only thing that actually made me find strength was this time when I was talking to my best friend, and I'd given up, and I was telling her, I'm tired, I can't do this anymore, I don't want this life anymore. And she asked me, I was very teary, and I remember she asked me, if you go, who am I remaining with? That was tough. And she asked me that question a couple of times. If you leave right now, And that was the beginning of living again.
Okay.
When she said that, and I realized my life is not mine, and it's not like they have given up on me. My friends are here with me. My family is here. I remember complaining to my aunt that I feel like I cannot help anymore. At that time, I've been out of work for over 6 months, and I remember her asking, because I was the kind of person who didn't know how to ask for help. I was so used to taking care of things. I guess being raised by a single parent, you're very independent someone. So to get to a space where you're a cabbage, it used to feel, I remember her also telling me, sometimes let people help you because then they get their blessings from that. And that's how I started asking for help. So I have been in that phase, not once, not twice, not thrice. But the fact that now I know for a long time I survived on I'm not living for myself anymore. And to get to a point where I actually now want to live for me, it's been a journey. And today I'm okay. Probably in the next few days I will not be having this conversation like this as well.
Yesterday I journaled something.
Yeah.
I was talking about how when you look at the sky, I love bird watching, I love moon sighting. When you look at the sky, it's very blue. But another person probably looking at it does not see it the same way that you do.
Yeah.
We are made of so many things as human beings. Stories, our journeys, our families, our biases.
Yeah.
But the most fundamental thing, even for me and even from a lot of people that I've experienced, is relationships. Relationships are varied and they come in all aspects. It's not one shoe fit all.
Yeah.
And I think when you have been given the notice to vacate, I am not sure if you've ever lost a house, but I've lost a house before. And I remember this time when I was coming from KNH and I came and I found a very big lorry waiting. They had broken into the door and taken most of the stuff. And I watched it. I just sat. I had a brown paper bag having my medicine.
Yeah.
And I watched the lorry go away, and it put me on spot in terms of relationships, in terms of this moment that acknowledges you, not as just your own person. Because we tend to believe there is this, it's very tempting to see it when you see it online when people say, oh, I am my own person, I can do my own shit. Yeah, you can do your own shit. But that's very true. But to the extent, to what extent are you able to do or conduct your own life as a business? I think when I was given that vacating notice, the moment you realize that your health is in crisis and it's going to be like that forever. It makes you feel conflicted because one, you do not want to live the whole life as a burden. You do not want to live with the regret of I cannot be able to provide.
Yes, you do that. You don't want to live your life as a burden.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you also know, it's not like you're not aware, you also know that the quality of our relationships actually make our life worth living. They add color to the lives we have. In fact, one of the things that makes surviving of any kind, not just for us who have been sick at one point, surviving of any kind is the quality of relationships that we have with ourselves and then with the people that are in our lives, from friends to community in churches to school to colleagues. These are different aspects of our lives, but the quality in it is actually what essentially makes our life bearable. There's no beauty of imagining a tomorrow or the next minute or the afternoon. I think when you live in such a space, it's so terrifying. So talk about relationships. How did that change your relationships with yourself and the people around you?
First of all, when you lose a relationship with yourself, the only thing that stands out is the relationship you have with other people. Because they're the one who feed into your soul. I had lost touch with myself. For a very long time, I was telling my friends, I don't know who I am anymore. Very basic questions like, what's your vision? It's so funny how people assume things. What's your dream? In the next 5 years, what's your plan? I'm like, I am planless. I am so clueless because how do you even answer that question, And my friends were there. even in times they did not understand, because the beginning of my sickness, I could not explain it.
There's no words for it.
And when it starts, you're so angry at life to the point where when you're even explaining, they won't get it, because you already, there's something, someone always says, when you're having a conversation and you're angry, there's already a blockage that's created for everybody else. So there's the aspect of entitlement when you're a bit sick. You're like, you people should get it. Like, I can't do this. Just understand that.
And yet it's experiential. You have to live it to know.
And to have them constantly ask me, how can we help? At the beginning was so stressful, because I also don't know what you also don't know what help you need. You're just hoping they will get to, like, and I am so thankful that I had friends who held me down even in that situation, because all of a sudden they have a friend who's very negative. I was always the bubbly one in the crowd. I was always the confident one. All of a sudden, I'm the one who...
The grumpy one. Socially awkward.
The socially awkward.
The one who cancels plans. The one who's always asking for help.
Yeah.
So there's this aspect of disconnect when you have a reality or an experience that sets you quite apart from the rest of the group.
Yeah.
How did you manage a bridging? Because what I know, this is very interesting. It's in terms of what I've shared, especially with my grandmother. My grandmother was very strong for people in the community. And she used to hold space for a lot of people. People used to, in Luo, and I've also been such a person to a lot of my friends. And so you get to a place where you are now PWD.
You can't be.
You're PWD, you are disabled, and you are not able to actually fulfill a part of who you are as much as you would have loved.
Yeah.
And it's easier to say when you're going through something. I'm very sure it's very common for people who have lost people, who have gone through grief. Somebody who is very strong and very graceful. People throw themselves to them and they have all the right words to say.
Amen.
And yet it happens to you. I think when you have been given the notice of borrowed time, you begin to you lose your language.
You lose your language, you lose your strength. In fact, what you're saying, I was being asked for advice. It's taken me 3 years to actually acknowledge I can give advice. Because by the time I was going through what I was going through, I started doubting my capability of even reasoning. There's a question you asked me now that you're having this conversation, and I didn't answer. The day I knew I was living on borrowed time was the day I forgot my pass. Forgetfulness. And for a long time, I've been known to forget stuff. But now it was getting worse. So I was in Nakuru. I forgot my pass, and that's where the fair was. And I remember hitting myself a number of times with the hope that
you will reset it. Remote irudi back to life. Yeah.
It's so funny what the mind can do to you, like in my head I'm thinking, when you used to do mistakes and you're beaten up. So maybe if you beat yourself up enough, you'll
jumpstart something.
Reset, as you said. And I was on the roads. I remember I was with a friend of mine called Jonah, and we were a team. The rest were in front and I and Jonah were behind. I went into a whole historical mode of just hitting my head, and Jonah saw me and calmed me down. And we never talked about it again. Never. And I thought by doing that I was okay. Then I come to Nairobi. I was having a show. A friend of mine was having a show at Alliance Francaise. Guess what? Steph forgot the pass. Where? Pale penye watu niniwa. Watu, the security check. I forgot my pass. And I went and I had fun. And then when people are going home, I can't remember where I left my pass. So now, the MC had to go and announce that I have lost the shame. you know how the society looks at you. How are you a woman who'd forget your past? And then the jokes they make. One day you'll even forget your own child. But they don't understand that you're just freaking and showing me that I'm not worth it, as you know. So I laughed it off. But I remember more anger. And when I went back to work, I shouted at my boss. She was asking me about something, and I don't know how my mind was operating at that time. It just felt like, I can't do this. Why are you asking me? And then I just became nini about it, But then that's when I realized I had lost my courteousness. I had become this insensitive human being, and there was no going back. And to be told I'll live with this for the rest of my life, I remember my boss telling me, she's actually the reason why I went for therapy. She told me, if this continues, we will lose you. And as of today, as we are speaking, you're going for therapy. And I told her I don't need therapy. I remember her carrying me in her car and taking me to a place where there was ninis for counseling. And she asked me to nini for it. And the next week, I was in for therapy. And it's through the therapy sessions that then I started understanding. The need to know what I'm suffering from and how badly off it might be. And now how to relate that to my friends. Because there's still a disconnect between me and my buddies. They don't understand what's going on. And since I'm always angry, I can't seem to explain it better. Do you know it took a year? It took 1 year for them to get, because now, by the time I was explaining, I was calmer, I was laughing. And I didn't understand why they kept asking me that question for a whole year. But that day,
it finally made sense.
It made sense. It clicked, because they used to ask me, so you're depressed? So depression is the issue. I'm like, people, depression for me is like when someone says my head is aching and they have malaria. For me, I call it a symptom. It's a symptom to what I'm going through.
It's a side effect of what you're going through.
Exactly. So then when they ask, when they think depression is the big deal, like, people don't get it.
In the same nerve, let's talk about, I've always talked about this with Zagero.
Yeah.
Zagero has plantar fascia. I think this is the correct term, yeah? The invisibility of a lot of sicknesses, and not just sicknesses, really, life. Yeah. You could have your friend, you talk every day, mna hang out, mna cheza ball, you go for shows, you attend events, you go to school together, you share community, you buddies. But then there is an invisibility that only you accesses. By the time you get to even move them to where you are so that they are able to actually share in the same ratio, like now the camera is taking us. Probably a 3:2 or a 3:4 or a 60:9. I don't know which frame it is. For you to paint that picture and tell your friend, my friend, this is what is happening. Many people usually feel like it's this grand thing. That's why they're telling you in terms of the atom of it.
Yes.
Is it depression?
Yes.
But it's usually the small, very tiny bits. Like you talked about the past. For me, the moment that I knew I was living on borrowed time, I went home. I was holding my daughter. I was still living with my daughter.
Yeah.
So this day we are swinging. We had those sway. We call them osway. Osway is a swing. Yeah. So I was pushing at my daughter, and she's laughing and coming back. And that is the first time my hair fell off. And it fell on a polka dot dress. It was a very beautiful polka dot dress. And suddenly, it became real. Because all this time, when you have a cancer diagnosis, you tend to process it. You tend to sometimes even deny it as not true. You tend to rationalize everything. You tend to do so much you not over-focus on it. Why? Because you still want to go back to your timeline. You still want to go back to the Dimore.
You just want to live your life,
I want that person.
Yeah.
But now I'm realizing I can't even protect my daughter from what is going to happen to me. I'm imagining that when I push her and the swing goes behind, when it comes back, it will not find me alive. It's terrifying.
It is.
It's terrifying. One of the most terrifying things for any person as a parent is the fear that you will leave this world. Not that they will not survive. Of course they will survive, but life will be ruthless. Ruthless in the sense of they won't have you materially. They won't have you as the intangible fatherhood that only fatherhood can provide, that only a parent can provide. And I think sometimes bringing somebody who has not experienced that in real time is one of the hardest challenges. I also agree with you that at some point I was angry, and it made me move more inward because I understood it. And it's not entirely that I understood. At some point I also didn't understand it. But I moved more inward because it was familiar. At some point I felt like, my friends, most of them had graduated. Some of them have their own kids, they have their own families. They are already, climbing the ladder. Their careers are expanding.
They're figuring it out.
Yeah, they're figuring it out. And I think also this is also when we were talking off camera a few days ago, we were talking about when in comparison to our friends or just generally to life, we usually use our stuck places, our places that are vulnerable. And you're in a train moving very fast, but life is kind of like in an inertia. You're moving behind, and that is what you're using to compare a life that you do not know the intricacies of. So I'm looking at Kwajidala and I'm thinking Kwajidala has it all together.
I know.
I'm looking at Rachel and Rachel's spontaneous, has it all figured out. I'm looking at Jagera and saying, oh, this is a cool buddy, but you do not know the intricacies of their life. And it's usually very hard for us to give each other grace.
Yeah.
Because most of the time we are selfish human beings can be selfish. And when you are going through it, when you're going through the most, you tend to be so self-absorbed. I remember when we were young, we used to play with it's a wild mushroom. It doesn't stay for long. Another thing of borrowed time. It doesn't stay for long. So we used to, comes up after one day, it turns into dust, a very, very yellow and mustard dust. So we used to kick it, and when it goes into somebody's nose, they would cough seriously.
Yeah.
It was very fun. So I tend to imagine also that's the same case with when we are trying to introduce people to what is going on in our lives. I remember we were sitting at All Saints Cathedral. We were trying to plan on our trip to India. I was with Jagero, with Aswani, with Dames, with Evans Dames. I was so terrified to make the very first speech. Remember when we were talking, I was telling you about the valedictorian speech.
Yeah.
It was the maiden speech I made introducing people to my story.
Yeah.
The first time I ever said publicly, like, yo, I've had this shit for some time, but it's kicking my ass. I don't know if I have time left. I was trembling. They had to stop mid-interview for a lot of times. I lost most of the lines. In fact, at some point, we abandoned the script. I don't know if Jagero remembers. We abandoned the script and we went off script.
Yeah.
But it was one of the most defining moments as well, because I knew once you put on clock, your life ceases to be your own.
It's no longer yours.
It's no longer yours. And that is the same way life has always been, all along. Because our lives are ourselves. It's individual, but it is beyond that as well. We live for people we love. We live for the community. We live for the visions. We live for the things we do not know as well. So connect me with how it because for what I know, it's usually even a three-way. There is the positive side, and there's the good side, and there's that which you do not know where to place it, the no man's land. And for chronic illness, the no man's land is something that is very, very common. So talk about how the positive sides of it, the negative sides of it, and how now you are trying to make meaning out of it, to rise above it.
I'm so glad you mentioned meaning, because 2018 was the year that I felt my art was picking up. That's barely a year before sickness. My poetry life was making so much sense. I was having so many strides, I was experiencing new stages. I was psyched for this life. I was ready to take up the bull, you know. And then... Not the cow, the bull, my friend. There's a Taurus, you take up the bull. Okay. But the forgetfulness, over to 2019, 2020, the forgetfulness. I write a script, I can't cram it. A script that would take me a day to master and present in less than 3 days. So now I'm back to being asked on interviews, how long do you take to write your script? And how long does it take you to master? And now I'm having a challenge. I can't even answer that question because, one, I can't. If I write, I still forget my thought process. I'm on brain fogs and brain fizz, only God knows how long, you know. When I'm mastering it, I'll only remember a few lines here and there. So I started asking myself, you had a whole vision. You knew you're going to be the next artist. One of the, you know, and you're going to impact lives. But then now I realize not in the way I thought I could. Because at least I could still perform. But then again, I used to... So you have a conversation and then you lose breath. And for a while, I really, really panicked. And I had to find meaning in life afresh. I had to ask myself, am I really an artist? Is this what I was really meant to do? And if that's the case, am I willing? Am I ready to go back to page poetry? Am I willing to start reading my pieces on stage? It took me a bit of time, but I guess inafikanga mahali una realize you're here to stay. Because by the time in 2020, I was telling people I'm on my bonus years. 2021 clocked. 2022 clocked. I'm just like, I can't continue living a sad life. I can't continue thinking maybe in the next few years I'm done, you know. And that's when the positive started. When I recognized that clearly this is here to stay.
We're here now.
We're here now, you know. I mean, I haven't stopped taking medication and I'm still alive. Okay, God, clearly you've decided we're here to stay. So teach me. I'm a super prayerful someone, so I would have conversations with God lots. I'm like, yeah, so show me. What do I need to do? Where do I begin? How do I acknowledge myself in this present stage, you know? And I started meeting people who reminded me that life is about change. And just taking you back kidogo, it's not that I hadn't gone through tough times, because sometimes you get really entitled when you go through tough times and now you're telling God, I think you're the only one here. You know, God, I've already experienced enough. Why are you putting me through this again? But to just acknowledge that even in those times I still found reason to stay was reason enough to now look at the positivity of things, just, you know, and to also understand, to also help people around my space to understand the situation I'm going through.
I'm going to ask you a very important question there.
Yeah.
What is the point? Because I have had situations or places where I thought I could abandon ship, not in the sense of exit or not live anymore, but those are also very common themes in my life. But I've also, like you, I'm an artist. Yeah. I've gotten to a point where I was feeling, what is the point of writing anymore? And I had a lot of people who used to tell me, write a book, you write so beautifully. I think I'm one of the artists in Kenya with the most extensive discographies, like a body of work. So I made nearly an album every year since I was diagnosed. So it got to a point where I was questioning myself, what is the point of my story? Where does my journey, what meaning does it have? The self-doubting, but also self-actualizing. Because I get to a place where I'm placing my story in another's. And then you get to realize that we human beings believe ourselves to be so different, so diverse, so distinct, so apart, so outside of the fence, so off the margin, that we think we are very different. But you look at it, Sometimes it's just the color that is different. Sometimes it's just the forehead, like Yajagero. Sometimes it's my very little goatee here that is different. Very little and minute statements of our story sets us apart. But so much of it brings us together. And it got to a point where I was involved in community service in Faraja, in Africa Cancer Foundation, when I was also doing the volunteering work in Moi Teaching and Referral and Kijabe. You get to, it goes back to the same thing that we shared earlier, that your life is not really your own. So I want you to share about what is time for you. What do you think? Do you think time is the material sense of it? Do you think time is a measure of how we live? Do you think time does what is time for you? So that when we talk about borrowed, how do we borrow it? From whom?
Time for me is existence. It's the ability, this is so cliche, but it works for me, the ability to recognize your breath. The ability to push through even in times when you think you can't anymore. Time for me is existence.
So time is itself.
Time is itself, you know. And if I've gotten to a point where I have recognized my life is not my own. And I can no longer live it in darkness.
Isolation.
Yeah, and in darkness and in
shame.
And in shame and in anger and in despair. I'm at a space where I woke up today morning. I want to enjoy every bit of it. Even in the pain, I still want to have stories and laugh with Jagero, you know. I want to speak to Ochuka and feel alive. So time for me is existence. Yeah.
You've talked about growth in the darkness. There's one thing when we were younger, we used to be told. My great-grandmother, I was very fortunate to see my great-grandmother, Guya Nyakoguta. So when Kachunya no Podho, she used to tell me, go take 2 very fat Roskoko. No, not the Roskoko people are thinking about. The real Roskoko. You'll take 2 Roskokos, go put it beneath the pea. The pea is the pot. It's a pot, yeah?
Yeah, it's the pot where you put water.
Drinking water.
So then it's cold.
A very good fridge.
It's literally the traditional fridge.
That's the shit right there. So you used to tell me, go take some Roskoko, put it up chini. When it sprouts, you'll feel better.
Oh.
It's a teachable moment.
Yeah.
Teachable moment about going inward and being introspective and being more intentional. I think you talked about earlier despair, isolation, anger. These things, we're not saying that they are bad. In fact, they are not. They are very legitimate as real sentiments and emotions. But we get to a place where we feel more alive when we rise above them. True. Or we use them as rungs of ladder to climb over ourselves and see ourselves as part of this ecosystem. So as we wrap up, tell me about your last shot, about living on borrowed time. Talk to people. Speak life.
Speak life.
Or time.
Or time. You are your scars. You are your bad times and your good times. You are with purpose. Everything you hold, be it difficult or easy, give hope to everyone else. You are your shame. Show it. You are your pain. Feel it. You are the love that may not be seen, that seems broken. You have it. And it is okay to ask for help. I'm here speaking. This is the second time I'm sharing my story. It's not one of those easy things to do, but imagine you have your story, share it, because there are people who will find strength in the same. And it's okay to be in a space where you feel you have borrowed time. At least you exist.
You exist. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Omonde Chuka, and this is Dialogues with Jage.